There it goes. Okay, so today we are going to talk about our last module, which is on writing. And for most people, you come to this class and you think, look, I'm not a writing teacher and I'm not going to be assigning any writing. Then you start teaching your first year and your principal's like, just remember, you have to have at least one writing assignment grade every marking period. And you're like, I do? Why? And it's simply because writing is such an important cognitive task for students to complete writing. It shows that they understand content on a different level. It's much deeper than taking a multiple choice test and just guessing the correct answers. If they can actually write about it in a coherent way, you know that they know the content. And so writing across the curriculum, which we call WAC, or writing in the disciplines, which we call WID, are two very popular acronyms that you'll hear. And depending on what school you're at, they'll use a different acronym. But it is required typically for you to have writing in most of your classes. Some principals are more lenient and they'll say you have to have one writing assignment per semester, where others will say marking period. Today's class isn't going to just summarize all the strategies you read about in the book, because I would never insult your intelligence by doing that. I'm going to give you some additional ones and then show you how they work and then set you free. So you do need to be on the Google lecture, the Google slides that I sent out. Let me share my screen. I'll show you how to get to it if you don't know. Okie dokie. So here in your class, I put the lecture in our course lecture spring 2020 folder, and I put it in by date. So today is class on April 9th. When you click it, it's going to open it up for you. Here you go. And this link provides you commenting options that you can actually go to insert, and you can actually comment on the slides. But this will allow you to be able to follow along. There's some fill-in stuff that we'll talk about briefly. Had we been together in class today, we would have done groups. We would have actually done these writing prompts and assignments together. We would have made posters, you know, the whole thing that we usually do. But I figured this is probably the best alternate way to do that. Sorry, my cell phone's ringing. It's always some random phone number. Nobody really calls me anymore. Let me make you guys smaller here. Okay. So I picked this meme last night when I was updating this lecture to put it on slides, because I felt like this picture reflects how many of our students feel. Have you ever felt this way when you're working as well? Isaiah's laughing. You get an assignment in a class and you're like, yep, that's exactly how I feel. So your students will feel that way as well. They'll walk into your physical education class, your 11th grade PE, and you'll say, okay, well, you guys are going to write this report. And they'll be like, what? It's PE. I signed up so that I wouldn't have to do any writing. And so we look for ways to give students writing assignments that are low stakes, less intense than a research paper, and gives them really a unique writing experience. So they're more prepared really for college and the real world. I'll never forget one of the first student teachers I ever had. She wrote her lesson plan for one 90-minute block in English, and it was 11 pages long. And I was like, what are you doing? What is this? And she's like, well, one of my teachers, everything had to be 10 to 12 pages long. And I'm like, that's not realistic, which is why in my classes, my lesson plans don't have length requirements. That's just way too much. So these are what teachers will usually say when they go to their in-services, where they're talking about writing in the disciplines or writing across the curriculum, the WID and WAC. They'll say, you know, hey, I'm not a writing teacher. That's the English teacher's responsibility. I'm not an English teacher. I don't know what to look for. I also don't have time to read all these writing assignments and grade them. I don't want to grade it. I don't know how to grade it. I'm not a strong writer myself. But writing is directly tied to your students' cognition and learning, because writing is just thinking that's been put down into words. Sometimes you can really find out where a student misunderstands something or way they've learned it in their brain incorrectly when they write it onto words. Write it on a paper and they give it to you and you're like, that is not what I said. Or, ooh, maybe I said it, but I didn't say it in a clear way, and that's why they wrote it this way. It really allows you to check for their understanding and what they think is very, very important. I had a student probably 3 semesters ago who told me in her reflection for this lecture. I don't care what my students think. I don't care about their interests. All I care about is if they can do this. And I thought, okay, relationships with students are really important, but also when we don't value what our students think and we don't explain to them that we value it and show them ways that they can express themselves, they aren't going to be really into our content. And our job as content teachers is to introduce them to the content and hopefully encourage them to be like us, to go into the sciences, to go into physical education, to enjoy sports and coaching, to, be a part of the discipline. That's the whole point in general studies education, is to, give students those opportunities to learn all these different topics. And so that's just my soapbox that I always say with students. Writing allows students to do all of these things. I won't insult your intelligence by reading you all of this, but I want to make sure that you realize there are 2 higher level tasks here. One is posing a question. If students can show that they understand something by creating questions or finding where people might disagree or counter an argument, they are really showing high level thinking. Also, the ability to construct knowledge for themselves. So to create something, to say, here's everything I've learned about nutrition, and now I'm going to create a meal plan for myself for the week to show that I really do understand nutrition and that I really do realize that the things I'm eating right now are probably not the most helpful. It put me on the path to the diabetes. You use writing to learn in your class really all the time without realizing it. You could have students just do a daily writing activity. It could only be a couple sentences. It could be, hey, why don't you come up with a discussion topic based on nutrition? What should we talk about? Okay, well, I think we should talk about sugar content. I think that's an important thing to talk about because I think people don't realize how much sugar they're eating every single day. Or it might just be at the end of a lesson just to check on their understanding or to ask them, hey, how did that lesson go? Did you get the main point? What was the main point? And it's okay if students all write stuff that you're like, that wasn't my main point. So I've got to figure out a different way to teach it. It allows you to really kind of articulate your teaching. It's important that you have students writing at different times. I never, as an English teacher, had my students writing at the beginning of class, every class. After like the 5th or 6th class, they would get bored. They would just start writing just to write. Same thing with discussion boards. I'm sure you guys have taken online classes before and done discussion boards where it gets to like the 15th person and they are just like re-summarizing something somebody else said. There's a lot of funny memes about that. But it's important to mix it up. Make it unpredictable. I would stop reading in the middle of a short story and say, hey, write me one question. Write me a test question right now. And they would be like, okay, well, let's see, we're reading the raven. So what does the raven symbolize? That type of thing. I wanted to break it down and show you all the different ways you can use writing. I have used this diagram multiple times in pre-service teacher training with Virginia Beach and Chesapeake Public Schools, and teachers have reported back that this is really quite helpful for them to be able to say, okay, what do I want my students to do today? Do I want them to reflect? Okay, so here are different options for reflecting, and here are different options for learning logs, for journals, for free writes. And then, I want something informal. I don't want a reflection at the end of class. I just want them to do something informal that kind of shows me right away what they get, what they learned. Here are some quick things to do. Or I'll have teachers who say, my content is just very ABC. Science is science and math is math. I would love to be able to put some creativity in my class. And then here are some things that we can do. So I wanted to show you this chart and give you a copy of it because teachers have said it's helpful. And today I'm going to talk about 3 or 4 of these that are listed. So it's probably been a long time since you did poetry, but poetry is becoming really, really popular, especially in the secondary grades, because teachers can really come in here and they can say, hey, let's do something short, sweet, easy, but also with your writing skills. So a 5-line poem, that's not too much. It doesn't have to rhyme. It could be phrases or list of words. And this is the scheme for a cinquain. Line 1, give the title of the topic. So it could be, trying to think of your content areas. I don't think we have any history people with us today. For English, right, it could be poetry. You could do a poem on poetry. 2 words that describe that thing, 3 words that express an action, so they should be verbs, 4 words that express feeling, and then the 5th word should be just another phrase, maybe a synonym. And that's what a lot of teachers will say, I want you to do a synonym or antonym to kind of check if students are getting that opposite type thing. And so I made a synquane on a synquane. Synquanes are 5 lines, does not rhyme. They synthesize, integrate, connect, summarize, and they're poems. When you do synquanes, always model them with students. Never give students a writing assignment and just give it to them and walk away. The basic model of teaching a lesson plan that we follow is we always instruct students, and then we do what's called guided practice. So that's us doing it with the kids. So for writing a journal, whenever I taught middle school, we always had a lot of journals. I would do the journal with them. And then I would share my journal. I'd put it under the dot cam. They could watch me journaling or watch me free writing or watch me creating an outline. And they could really kind of see how I'm doing it and model it themselves. I always like when students do these little poetry activities to have them do it and hang it up in the room or share it with a small group. I used to use learning groups with my 10th graders. So they had the same 4 students they worked with all year. And they became very comfortable with each other. They'd say something like, oh man, you always do that. They start to really realize how they learn and how they best demonstrate their learning. So here's one on health. Student made this last semester. This is one on nutrition. It's pretty good. If I was a teacher and I had just taught this whole big unit on nutrition, and I said, okay, for homework, you're gonna write a synquane on nutrition, turn it in, put it in our Google Classroom, write it down on paper, give it to me. I could really see if they got the main points that I was hoping they got. And maybe, calories, food labels, and dieting are all things that I talked about significantly. If there was a term that I had really focused on for like days and days and it wasn't here in the synquane, I would wonder if I needed to kind of put that in my exam review and really review that a little more. So that's a synquane. Most of you have probably never thought about using a poem in your class. For those of you who are not into the poetry aspect and you're like, I am literally never going to do that, Dr. Rippard, a response heuristic is really popular. It is especially popular with the arts and languages, where we give students this 3-column chart. Left-hand side, we provide them either the information, the quote, the idea, the drawing, the piece of music. In the middle, we have the students do 2 parts of a reaction. And then on the right-hand side, we have them do their associations. And you could tell them, depending on your level of learners, they have to connect to their self, text, media, or world, or all 4. And this actually could become the basis for a writing assignment or a presentation assignment. So here's an art one. I chose this because I didn't get to see the Scream that was here at the Chrysler. I think everything's closed now. But we did a little bit of interpretation. We talked about associations. This is an example from art class. So had we been in class today, I would have put this up here. And this is a game plan. And I would have had you tell your interpretation of looking at this game plan. And then I would have had you make some associations. I'm not going to have you do that today, but I will flip back over so I can see you guys. There you are. And I'll just ask you to share orally. So when you're looking at this game plan, can someone share their interpretation of the game plan? What do you see here? What is happening? How do you feel about it? What is it? Anything. You can start with, what game is it? Anyone know? I see a chat. Kaylee said, it's soccer. Good job, Kaylee. I had this up last night. My husband walked by. He's like, are you teaching football? And I was like, hey, I'm not good with sports, but that's not football. I think you walked by too fast. What do you associate with this soccer game plan? How many of you played soccer as a kid? Yeah. So you instantly have some associations. You might love it or you might hate it. Yes, this one actually was labeled as a football game plan. Good job, Andrea. So that might be a good association to realize that soccer is definitely an American term, right? If I was looking at this, my association would be, last time I played soccer, I sat on the bench all game and I ate oranges. That was pretty much my entire soccer career. I was really good at the bench. I'm just saying, that's all. But this could be used at the beginning of class. You could say, okay, this is how we're going to begin class today. Show them a picture of something, have them get started on it, have them share, and then do your lesson, your activity, get them outside, play soccer. Or you could use it at the end and say, tomorrow we're starting soccer. We're going to talk about game plans. Give them this and have them do this for homework. And they could share it at the beginning of class. I am not going to be a soccer mom, Andrea. No, we're not a soccer family. My kid plays golf and he swims and he plays baseball. Of course, he plays nothing right now. He plays my nerves. How about that? That's what he's playing. It's a good game to play. So let's switch over and talk about found poetry a little bit. I have to move this out of the way. I can't see anything. There we go. So one of the things that I hadn't really ever used, to be honest, I've been through years of education, and I taught English for many years, and I've been in higher education and teacher prep now for 10 years. This is my 10th year teaching you guys. And found poetry is always something that is in the textbooks and when I go to trainings and people talk about it, and I've never been an advocate of it until last year. I went to go observe. One of my friends was struggling. She just made the career switch from working in a bank to being a math teacher. And her school's plan for accreditation was to focus on writing and the disciplines because students were not doing well in their writing SOL. That was the only area that they were failing. And so she's like, I'm just struggling to teach algebra. I don't know how to do writing as well. Can you help me? And we've been friends. She was in my wedding. We've been friends for a really long time. And I said, yeah, let's do it. And so she had actually the booklet that I had done for Virginia Beach like 5 years ago about writing and the disciplines. And she was like, I really am interested in found poetry. And I think my face said it all. And she's like, why'd you put it in the book if you hate it? I'm like, it just never worked for me. I never could wrap my mind around it. And she's like, I think it's going to work for me though. This is how I teach and I like it. So what she would do is she would select a document. Now, Algebra 2 is a lot of statistics and data. And so she would select an article that had all this stat in it. It was based on medical stuff. And she would have students underline words or phrases, have them do read alouds, have them make it into Post-it notes, and then hang them up on the wall, like in a word wall. Then she would have students take all the words that they found in this reading that they thought were important, and she would have them arrange it in some way physically to create a poem. And it worked. Her test scores were really good. Kids really knew what they had read. It really allowed them to analyze the writing. And I thought, wow, that's really good. Why have I never done that? I could have done that with my English kids, and it may have really helped them understanding, especially Shakespeare and things like that. Let me give you an example. So this is a reading that one of my friends uses for history. She has students in American literature when they start studying the, Reconstruction period. They read all about people that had to work in factories and the migration from the farm to the city. And so she'd have kids read this and they wouldn't understand what they read. Then she would have them do the example. They would pull out sentences and make it into a poem. She'd also have them do a comic strip with this, and each line was a different image, just to put some art in there as well if you're looking for some art crossover. So really interesting way of doing it. One of the things that I always tell people when they're doing found poetry, always make sure to make your first and last line the most powerful. And I used to tell students, if people only read the first and last line, will that give them the main idea? And also, don't be afraid of repetition. Kids are typically just trying to put different things on each line, but stories and things that they're reading and analyzing can be really repetitive, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. And then also, like I just said, try to use some images as well. That's a good idea. So now we'll switch gears and talk briefly about writing and research. And this would have been in class, we would have done this on the smartboard. I want everyone to share. When you're assigned a research paper in high school, What kinds of research papers were you asked to do? Turn your mics on, share with us. Think about high school and middle school too. What kind of research papers were you asked to write? What topics? Hasn't been that long for you guys. For me, it's been 18 years. Oh my God. If I had a kid the year I graduated from high school, it would be like an adult. Ah.
I have a terrible memory, so I can't.
You're like, it's the middle of the day, Dr. Rupert. It's my nap time.
I don't remember writing like many research papers in high school, but I remember when I got to college, like that started more like the research type.
Yeah. Is a book report a research paper?
I don't know.
Think about that.
Nope.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe if you have to research an author, if you had to do a presentation. Typical tasks for research include like, hey, go out and find an article or tell us about this book or tell us about this person. Or in the English classes, doing argument papers, right? Pick a topic and argue for or against it. That's pretty common for high school, especially like 11th grade. In the sciences and math, it's a famous mathematician or a scientist. It's a method, write the history of something. History class, it's battles and wars and reasons why conflicts occurred. It's government and why governments failed or why they were good. Law and arguing court cases. There's a lot of writing going on, and you may not realize that most of the time it requires kids to do research. You're like, I taught them. They read the textbook. I gave them PowerPoint after PowerPoint and lecture after lecture. The paper should have been easy to write. And then you get an email from a mama that says her kid's been at the library for 4 hours every single night and he needs more time. So a lot of times we as teachers know the content so well that we tend to not realize that what we are giving kids are high-level research assignments and that it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary. I have a girlfriend who teaches math, and instead of doing a traditional research paper, she has the kids do fashion shows where they make outfits out of paper using different shapes. And on each shape, they label the mathematician related to that shape. That is research. It doesn't have to be written in paragraphs. It doesn't have to have a thesis. It's still research and writing. So I'm going to tell you today 2 different ways to make research more authentic for your content areas, because you guys as adults are not going out and writing research papers on the best vacuum to buy, are you? You like sit down with your husband or your wife and you're like, I think we should buy a Dyson, and let me tell you all the research why. This user on Google says, right? Who talks that way? Andrea's laughing. Like, no one talks that way.
Actually, I do that a lot. Okay. I research a lot. Okay.
Yeah, I research stuff, but then I just tell my husband, this is the one we're picking. But we can give kids authentic tasks. It doesn't have to be a research paper that they've written and, have to give to their spouse. I just tell my husband, this is the one we're getting. So think about it this way. If we believe, and this is the basis for our class, that prior knowledge is critical for learning, right? We want kids to activate the prior knowledge. We want to know what they know, want to help them develop that. We might try one of these different research papers. And if you're at a school that says, hey, kids need to be writing, they should be writing 2 or 3 pages in each class, these could be really short, easy writing assignments to integrate. One's called the iSearch paper and the other one's called the 3 search process. So the iSearch paper is a little bit different. Instead of writing an essay based on the topic, the essay, the presentation, the outline, whatever it is you're having them make, actually begins with almost a KWL platform. At the beginning, they may have a section or a couple of paragraphs where they talk about what they knew about the topic and how they began their search. We never ask kids this. Please turn your paper in on, the causes for World War II on Friday. But we never ask them, what did you already know about the causes and how did you know that? How did you begin your research? Where did you start? What keywords did you type into Google? We never ask them. And those are important when we're helping kids develop research skills. And also the guiding question on an iSearch paper is, how did you answer the question that you had? How did you answer the question about what are the causes of World War II? And then the last section is usually an I learned. And this is where the kids are giving you the research. I learned this because of so-and-so. I learned this. I watched this video. And it allows kids to give value to lots of different resources as well, rather than saying you have to have 3 academic resources from Thompson Gale and you have to cite the encyclopedia one time. That stuff is, leave that to the English teacher. Leave that to Andrea and don't worry about it. She's like, thanks a whole lot. The 3 search process has 3 sections in the paper or the presentation or whatever you're doing with the kids. The first is that same activating of prior knowledge. However, they're doing this and then also sharing it with friends. So you may say, I want you to write 2 paragraphs that, share what you're wondering about the topic and the causes of World War II, what your interest is and what you're hoping to learn more about, and what you already know. And that's due Friday. They come in, you put them in groups, and they share everything. And then they're updating their prior knowledge as well. Then step 2 is for them to gather information by interviewing experts and other peers with related experience. So it's not sending them to the library. It's having them go out in the internet, onto forums, to listen to first world accounts, to watch the History Channel live documentary of World War II, to really have them engage in authentic research. Then they can also access the print and media resources as well. And then they come back again all together and they share the second part. And then the third section after they've done that is communicating what they've learned. What have I learned? Why is it important? What would I do with it in the future? Why would somebody find this information important if they were a history person? And they put all these 3 sections together into their paper, or what you might consider a paper for your class. But it's done in steps, probably throughout a marking period or throughout an entire course, instead of giving kids this big assignment right from the beginning and saying, here's your research paper, where they instantly go, oh, I hate research papers, right? So these types of research assignments work best for the content areas because it takes away from that, this is an English research MLA paper, and puts it more into an authentic task of, how do I research something? And hopefully prepares them for college. Like Marley was saying, college, that first semester is pretty intense. It's write a paper on everything, every single topic under the sun. So any questions about any of these different writing ideas that I shared with you today? No? You guys are always so quiet. Is there one that you kind of like, either from a teacher standpoint or a student standpoint? Think about it. In this class, I encourage you, especially as we begin next week working on our big disciplinary literacy unit plan, to think about things you like as a student. Don't ever assign something that you wouldn't enjoy doing yourself. You're not going to enjoy grading it, for one. So let's switch gears a bit. I'm going to make this slide big. So I had to rethink yesterday pretty deeply about the end of the class, because from here on out, we come together and we work on the bulk of the grade, which is out of the disciplinary literacy unit project. The first thing you'll have to do, I think on the 20th, I've pushed it back to, is your outline. So a complete outline of the project. Then after that, you will start having the drafts and then the final draft. Next Thursday, when we come together, I will be going over the whole assignment sheet with you. We will be talking about the project. We'll be looking at examples. I'll be having you share. So I'll probably have you I was thinking Google Doc, but I haven't really decided. I may have you just share orally. So you will need to be able to talk next week and participate a little more than usual. What I want you to do to prepare for Thursday, 5 things. 1, I want you to go into Blackboard and read the assignment sheet. I'm going to pull it up in a second and show you where it's located. Based on the assignment sheet, I want you to draft 2 questions you have about the assignment. Any 2 questions that you have. I want you to read through all of the example files in Blackboard. Give them a skim and look at the stuff last semester that students created. I've given you, I think, 2 outlines and at least 3 or 4 different complete unit plan projects to look at. And then to prepare for our discussion on Tuesday, I want you to write one sentence that defines literacy in your content area. So based on everything you've learned this semester, literacy in history class is, and finish the sentence. I want you to submit your 2 questions and your definition on a Google form, and we'll use those to inform our class next Thursday. So let me show you what I mean. So here is the Google form. I have you put in your name. That way I can kind of keep track of who's participating and doing their work. I give you 2 spaces for you to put in your questions on the assignment. So whatever questions you have, like, oh, how am I going to choose a topic, or whatever question you have, just put it here so that I can use that to inform our discussion next Tuesday. And then here I have you kind of begin what is the first step of the project, which is clearly defining literacy for your area. And so I say, define literacy in your content area, be specific for your subject. Use keywords and vocabulary that is specific, to music and art. For example, I might say, because I'm an instructional technologist, instructional technology is my field, I was going to do English, and then I was like, well, that's not fair for Andrea because she's English, right? So I was like, let me pick something else. Sorry, Andrea. So I said, literacy in instructional technology is being able to use a variety of technologies to learn and teach, as well as find and evaluate new and old technologies for effectiveness and appropriateness. That's a lot. You don't have to have that many keywords, but I wanted to show you exactly how I describe my literacy in my area. I described actions that kids can do. You're not kids, future teachers, adults. If you're a person that's past instructional technology and you can use instructional technology, these are the verbs, these are the actions that I would expect. And so this gives you kind of a good basis for thinking about literacy in your area. Realize I did not say being literate in instructional technology means being able to read and write about instructional technology. What? That's the literal title of the class. So what does it mean specifically for your area? If a kid is in your class, your PE class, and they walk away and you say, okay, I taught a whole unit on nutrition and they are literate in nutrition. What does that mean? What are the tenets of nutrition that these kids are now literate in? What are the things they can do? So it's not an easy task, which is why I'm giving you a week to kind of play around with the words in the sentence and to really share, this is just between me and you, what your working definitions are and have you think. In Blackboard, under assignments, you have the Disciplinary Literacy Inquiry Project. Woo-hoo. So here is the assignment sheet that I want you to read. My computer will be so slow opening this, I'm sure. It's going. I really have to get a new computer. I'm realizing it now more since I'm 100% home and all the time. And I'm like, oh, I've become too focused on my phone and too used to just using my phone for everything. Come on, come on. There it goes. See how slow it is? There we go. So you have a rich project description and purpose and project goals. And I know for most of you, you're probably like, I don't care. It's just a project. I have to do it. I have to get my grade. I'm with you. I get it. But look through these goals of the project at least. These are the things that you're being graded upon and the things you need to be able to do. Then come down here to the guidelines. This right here in the Roman numerals is the requirement for the project. This is what we'll use as a foundation for the outline assignment, which is the first major part that you have to do. And you can see the very first section is, what does it mean to be literate in your discipline? Which is why I'm having you work on that between now and then, between now and next Thursday. And then you come down here and you actually start planning a lesson. And it says, you need to describe at least 3 literacy strategies in sections D, E, and F. And we'll talk more about that next Thursday. And then you have a reflection, which is pretty easy, right? That's just you writing and reflecting upon, your thoughts here. It does say let me move this because I can't see you, that there is a 7-page minimum for the assignment. And instantly when students get in this class, even though this is a senior level classes, 400 level, people are like, 7 pages. Look at the student examples in Blackboard. Because when you start creating activities, each of them takes a page. So if you have 3 activities for each of those up there, that's a lot. And so you may be surprised that some people's projects end up being 15 pages, just because one activity worksheet is a page. So don't worry about that too much. But I want you to read through this closely, think about how you're going to do this in your area, and really come up with some good questions. The second thing I want you to do before I see you is I want you to look at the examples folder. So here I give you 2 outline examples, and you may just look at those outlines for now. You may be like, okay, I need to prioritize my time. The outline's the first thing that we have to do. I'm just going to look at the outlines, and that's fine. Look here at the outlines and think about how the students have set up their definitions, how they've come up with their activities, what their thoughts are about what they did when they were planning. I can tell you that sometimes the outline changes a lot. And then I've given you 4 unit plan examples. So let me just pick one. Here we go. I tried to pick different content areas. So this one's visual arts. And so this was from last semester. This is an art student. And she talks a lot about what it means to be literate in her area. She has her research, which we'll talk about on Tuesday. You have to use a couple outside resources. And then she also then has her lesson plan. And hers ended up being 9 pages when she got to the end. And you're like, 9 pages? Yeah, because there is a lot here. And you can see here on her bibliography, she used our textbook. She used the Miller document, the Moji document, and the Shanahan document. These were all from her annotated bibliography assignment. Those were all from that folder in the class. And so she only had one outside source that was actually on art literacy. She based most everything on the literature in this class that she'd already read, which is totally fine. So that's what I want you to do before I see you next Thursday. I want you to read the assignment sheet and come up with 2 questions. And then I want you to look at all these examples and read through them and submit also with your 2 questions your working definition for what it means to be literate in your content area. Now, if you're K-12, you take this class to get the 6 through 12 part of your degree certification because this is a class meant for secondary literacy. So you do need to focus on teaching in the secondary level, even if it's just 6th grade. And for those of you who are planning to teach special education and work across the content area, I would suggest picking one content. So if you got hired today as a special education teacher and they said, what do you want to do for inclusion? What topic do you like to work with? You might think, I think I want to be an English inclusion teacher. I want to work with English teachers. Then focus everything around English class. Okay? Does everybody else, you guys have content areas? You should be pretty straight. I hope that helps. So let me turn the floor back to you guys. Oh, it's so weird. I can't see Isaiah today. Isaiah, no guitar? No guitar today? Questions, comments, concerns? Show of fingers. Are you ready to move? Oh, there you go. Are you ready to move away from content and ready to start working on the final project? Hands ready for final project? Somewhat ready, or I'm not ready for the semester to end? Niles is like, I'm not ready. Still trying to get caught up in other classes? Just remember that I did extend this semester. This class usually ends right before final exams, but I'm giving us into the final exam period as long as I can so that we really have, I think on the calendar, at least 3 full weeks to do this project. And we still have 2 face-to-face meetings like this. So you have plenty of time, but we do need to start the planning process. Because if we wait too long, you're going to be spending hours trying to do the planning while you're working. And that's just going to be super overwhelming. So let's go ahead and do the first part. Next week, we'll come together. We'll talk about those questions. I'll answer questions. I will actually bring in more student examples that aren't in that folder. I'm going to bring in some what I call the good, the bad, and the ugly, and talk about what was good and what was bad and things to kind of avoid when you're planning a lesson and talking about literacy. And then I'll also get you started on your outline, which will be the first thing that I'll read and give you feedback on. If you don't have any questions, we are done for today. You can always message me. What? Niles, why are you laughing at me?
Because my mom was in the camera and she didn't want to be.
Oh, it's funny. Okay, so yesterday I gotta tell you guys, I was in a meeting with a doctoral student, and her daughter took off all her clothes and ran through the background. She was like, "Oh my God." I'm like, "It's okay, I have kids and I can't keep them in clothing either." So it was really funny. This is online teaching, guys. Getting photo bombed or video bombed all the time. All right, email me if you have questions. You're welcome to stay. I'm going to turn the recording